The metal gate groaned and shuddered as the engine of my monster truck roared to life. The 44-inch tires pressed against the gravel with earth-shaking force. Through the windshield, I saw her standing there, Patricia Thornfield, the president of the Meadowview Estates, HOA, with that clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. Her perfectly styled bob didn't move an inch, even with the dust my truck was kicking up. Patricia had no idea what was coming next. 6 months ago, I moved into my dream home. After 15 years of saving every penny from my job as a diesel mechanic, I bought the old Henderson Ranch on the edge of Meadowview Estates. 20 acres of Texas land with a farmhouse, barn, and enough space for my horses. Though technically within the HOA boundaries, the previous owners had lived there peacefully for decades. I should have known trouble was brewing the day I moved. In doubt as my friends helped me unload furniture, Patricia marched up my driveway in her power suit and heels, clipboard in hand. She introduced herself with a cold smile and handed me a 300-page OA rulebook. The moment she laid eyes on my pride and joy, my custom-built monster truck parked beside the barn, her smile vanished. That was when the trouble began. From then on, Patricia made it her mission to make my life miserable. The violation notices started almost immediately. First, she claimed my truck was a commercial vehicle, which couldn't be parked on residential property. When I showed her it was registered as a personal vehicle, she switched to noise complaints, even though I never started it before 10 a.m. on weekends. Then came citations for my barn being the wrong shade of red, my mailbox being 2 inches too tall, and my gravel driveway not meeting HOA standards. I tried to be reasonable. I attended every HOA meeting, calmly explaining that my property had been there long before most of the subdivision was built. I presented county records showing grandfather clauses. Patricia, however, wasn't having it. She'd find new violations each time I resolved the previous one. She fined me for having chickens, calling them livestock in a residential area. She even tried to fine me for having wildflowers growing in my pasture, claiming they were weeds. The other board members seemed uncomfortable with her vendetta, but Patricia had been president for 8 years, ruling with an iron fist. Nobody dared challenge her. My elderly neighbor, Mr. Thompson, quietly told me she'd driven out 3 other families who didn't fit her idea of the perfect neighborhood, but I wasn't going anywhere. This land was mine, bought with hard-earned money. Things escalated when Patricia discovered a loophole in the HOA bylaws. Properties over 10 acres required special gates that met HOA architectural standards. My simple ranch gate, which had stood for 50 years, suddenly needed replacing. She gave me 30 days to install a $6,000 wrought iron monstrosity. I filed an appeal with the county, arguing that the rule had never been enforced on agricultural properties. While waiting for the hearing, I kept meticulous records of every interaction. Every letter, every threatening phone call. Then came the morning everything changed. I woke at 5:30 to feed my horses, but when I reached my front gate, a massive padlock hung from the latch. A laminated notice was zip-tied to the bars, declaring my property abandoned due to failure to comply with HOA regulations. My blood ran cold. My horses were inside. My dogs were inside. My entire life was behind that locked gate. I immediately called Patricia. My hands were shaking with rage. She answered with a smug tone, explaining that since I'd refused to replace the gate, she'd taken measures to secure the property. She'd already filed reports with the county, claiming the property was vacant and deteriorating. For 3 hours, I tried everything. I called the sheriff's department, but they said it was a civil matter. I called a locksmith, but Patricia had threatened them with legal action. I even called my lawyer, but he was in court. Meanwhile, my horses hadn't been fed, and my dogs were likely panicking. I was supposed to be at work fixing county emergency vehicles. Patricia had timed this perfectly, knowing I'd be desperate, Standing at that gate, listening to my dogs barking in the distance, something inside me snapped. Patricia thought she had won. She thought her little power trip gave her the right to hold my life hostage. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. I walked back to where my monster truck sat in my friend's driveway. The massive machine seemed to sense my intention, its chrome exhaust pipes gleaming in the morning sun. I climbed into the driver's seat and fired up the engine. The roar echoed across the neighborhood as I drove toward my property. Neighbors peeked out from their windows to see what was happening. I pulled up to the gate, sitting there for a moment, giving Patricia one last chance to back down. She stood beside her luxury SUV, arms crossed, a smug smile plastered on her face. She wagged her finger at me, like I was a misbehaving child. That was all I needed. I shifted into gear and pressed the accelerator. The monster truck lurched forward, its massive tires climbing over the gate's bottom rail like it was a speed bump. Metal shrieked as 4,000 pounds of American steel met flimsy iron. The padlock snapped like a pretzel. The gate posts, poorly anchored, ripped out of the ground. In 3 seconds, the barrier Patricia thought would break me lay in twisted pieces across my driveway. Patricia's scream pierced the air as she fumbled for her phone, likely to call 911, but I was already through, parking my truck beside the barn and rushing to check on my animals. As I filled water troughs and scattered feed, I could hear sirens. In the distance, I wasn't worried. For the first time in months, I felt in control. Patricia had finally overplayed her hand. 20 minutes later, 2 sheriff's deputies stood in my driveway, surveying the damage. Patricia ranted beside them, demanding my immediate arrest for destruction of property, trespassing, and probably terrorism if she could make it stick. But Officer Harrison, the older deputy, held up his hand for silence. He asked for documentation. About the gate, Patricia proudly produced her HOA paperwork, not realizing she was signing her own warrant. Officer Harrison studied the papers, then made several phone calls. His expression grew darker with each conversation. Finally, he turned to Patricia with a look that made her step back. The gate, he explained, had been installed without proper permits. Worse, by locking me out of my legal residence, she had committed false imprisonment. The fraudulent reports she filed with the county about abandoned property were false official statements. The HOA funds used to install the illegal gate? That was misappropriation, at best. Embezzlement, at worst. Patricia sputtered excuses, but neighbors began gathering. The same people who'd been too intimidated to speak up at meetings suddenly found their voices. Mr. Thompson produced a folder full of illegal fines Patricia had imposed. The Johnsons revealed that she'd used HOA funds for personal landscaping. The new family on Oak Street shared recordings of her making discriminatory comments about their ethnicity. Years of abuses poured out like water through a broken dam. By noon, an emergency HOA board meeting was called right in my front yard. Patricia tried to regain control by citing bylaws about proper meeting procedures, but the board members had heard enough. The vote to remove her was unanimous. As she stood there, mouth opening and closing like a landed fish, Officer Harrison informed her that the district attorney would be reviewing charges. The color drained from her face as he mentioned potential penalties of up to 5 years in prison for false imprisonment and fines exceeding $50,000 for her various violations. Patricia's hands shook as she clutched her clipboard. Her perfect composure finally cracked, and tears of rage and humiliation streamed down her face. She pointed a trembling finger at me, shrieking that I had ruined everything, that the neighborhood would fall apart without her leadership. But Officer Harrison placed a hand on her arm and quietly told her she needed to come to the station for formal questioning. As she was escorted toward the patrol car, more revelations emerged. The city inspector who examined the destroyed gate found that Patricia had been falsifying inspection reports for years. Every gate, fence, and modification she forced on residents had been approved without proper permits, leaving homeowners liable for thousands in retroactive fines. The HOA's insurance company was already on the phone with their lawyers, preparing to drop coverage and sue for fraud. Patricia stumbled as the reality hit her. Her real estate license, which she had used to intimidate new residents, would certainly be revoked. The county prosecutor mentioned additional charges of extortion and racketeering, explaining that her pattern of harassment could qualify as organized crime. The fines alone could reach $200,000, not counting civil lawsuits from dozens of homeowners she had terrorized over the years. Patricia's designer heels caught on the gravel as she reached the patrol car. She turned one last time, mascara running down her cheeks, and saw the entire neighborhood watching. These people, who she'd controlled through fear and bureaucracy, now witnessed her complete downfall. As the deputy guided her into the back seat, she whimpered about her reputation, her standing in the community, and her charity fundraisers. Officer Harrison's response was blunt. She was looking at a minimum of 3 years, possibly up to 10 if all charges stuck. Patricia's wail of despair was cut short as the patrol car door slammed shut. Only the echo of my monster truck's engine cooling in the morning breeze remained.